because you know nobody else is going to do it for you. So go ahead and have a seat. And meantime, I was on a, it was on a tour, and so we're all on a bus, and there were 34 of us in a bus. And so what I like to do, I like to go around and find out about everybody and see who they are. So Art, my man, says to me, you know, there's a man that's a minister. I go, really? So he's a Baptist minister. I'm not kidding. And so I have a little bit to share about that, but I found a good joke about Baptist minister. Okay? All right, because he was a real sweet guy. Anyway, so this is called the Baptist dog. A Baptist preacher and his wife decided to get a new dog. Ever mindful of the congregation, they knew the dog must also be a Baptist. They visited kennel after kennel and explained their needs. Finally, they found a kennel whose owner assured them that he had just the dog they wanted. The owner brought the dog to meet the pastor and his wife. "Fetch the Bible," the owner commanded, and the dog bounded to the bookshelf, scrutinized the books, located the Bible, and brought it to the owner. "Now find Psalm 23, he ordered. The dog dropped the Bible to the floor and, showing marvelous dexterity with his paws, leafed through and, finding the correct passage, pointed to it with his paw. The pastor and his wife were very impressed and purchased the dog. That evening, a group of church members came to visit. The pastor and his wife began to show off the dog, having him locate several Bible verses. The visitors were quite impressed. One man asked, "Can he do regular dog tricks too?" "I haven't tried yet," the pastor replied. He pointed his finger at the dog and said, "Heel." The dog jumped into a chair, placed one paw on the pastor's forehead, and began to howl. The pastor looked at his wife in shock and said, "Good Lord, he's not a Baptist, he's a Pentecostal." I love it, a Baptist dog. Well, on this trip it was interesting because I would just, you know, we'd be walking along and we're going to these different places, and I would just say, "Well, what do you do in the world? And what do you do in the world? And what do you do in the world?" And so I actually talked to the Baptist minister, and he had a church at one time, and he said, "I am so glad I'm retired," because it was really, really a job to run that church. And I said, "I hear you." But I said, "You know, it's also worth it, right?" And he said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." But what he's doing now, he's doing missionary work, and he goes to Cuba. And I said, "Do you speak Spanish?" Because he's married to a Japanese woman. And he said, "No, I don't, but I have a good translator." I said, "Okay, good." So wherever he goes, but that's what he's doing now. But he also talked about how we have to create what we need in our lives. And even though he had a successful church, he said that I had to make sure I had a lot of different sources of income coming in. And he said, because I did that, you know, we were able to be financially healthy. And I said, "Well, that's great." And he says, "And even to this day, I may have an organization that supports me, but I also have 2 or 3 other resources that takes care of me." And that's really talking about our lives, you know, that we can't depend on one thing. And that if we're guided to do different things in order to make our lives better and to make them more joyful, then we do that, yes? And that's how God guides us. So the minister told me a story about one of his colleagues that was in another country and was being supported by an organization for 25 years. And for 25 years, they took up everything, you know, all of his food, his living expenses, everything, while he was in that mission in that country. Well, after 25 years, it dried up. And he said this man became so depressed. But what it shows us is that we have to be open and available all the time. And in our teaching, you know, we don't look at one thing as our source. We know that God is our source, so we don't look at a person as our source or this as our source. We allow ourselves to be open, and if there's something else for us to have in our lives, then we're able to have that and expand that as well, yes? And that's really what it's about. And our teaching is about being open and available all the time and being open-minded. So as I'm on this trip, it was lovely to hear the guide, and his name's Rui. And Rui was talking about how the people in Portugal, if you don't know the history, I was in Portugal. And if you don't know the history, they were under a fascist rule for over 40 years. And they couldn't say anything. They had no freedom of speech. They were in fear because they would have something happen horribly to them if they went against Salazar, and that was the dictator at the time. So the people of Portugal have developed, because of going from one extreme to another and also declaring their freedom, and they finally got their freedom, and now they're a free, open country. And it's run by, not a president, he said he's a figurehead, but that they are run by a prime minister. And so he's really the leader of the country. But he said that the philosophy of the people is that they're in the middle area. They're not too far to the left, not too far to the right. They want to be in the middle so that they can all come together in harmony. And I love that. And every restaurant we went to, every small town we went to, it was beautiful because you could see that they were a joyful, peaceful, happy beings, and it was great. And if you just smiled at them, they smiled at you. So they're open and loving people, and that's why I love traveling there so much. But one of the things that I had the opportunity, obviously, to drive back, and I'm watching movies like crazy. And there's a movie called The Darkest Hour. And The Darkest Hour was about the time during World War II with the time of Hitler. And this is during Britain's time with the Prime Minister Churchill. And I don't know if you know the story or not. So there's two movies out right now. And one of them is called The Darkest Hour. The other one is called Dunkirk. And if you don't know about that time in history, which I didn't, because I wasn't around then. My mom was around then, and she said, you have no idea, because my mom's 93 now, she said, you have no idea. The reason why we decided to go ahead and help our allies in Europe is that we saw that if we didn't, Hitler was going to take over. And he was going to take over the entire world if he could, because that was his vision. And the reason why France surrendered, and I'm giving you a little history lesson, but they surrendered thinking that, then they'll go easy on ourselves. Oh, no. They started, and then Hitler started, exterminating the Jews and the Gypsies and anybody else who wasn't like the Germans and the Aryan race. And so what happened is that England was about to be invaded. And the former prime minister, prior to Churchill, they finally said, he doesn't know what the heck he's doing, and he's doing nothing. We're in a war right now, and he's not helping us. So the reason I'm talking about this is that Churchill really believed in himself. And if you don't know much about him, read a little bit about him, because for us, we have a belief system, and we believe in a certain way of doing things, and nobody liked him, including the king. He did not support him. They actually elected him, but in Parliament he was not popular, and the king didn't like him either. And he didn't care, because he knew that he had a vision of peace and knowing that they were going to have victory in the war. And that's the only thing that he ever kept holding. And he was an eccentric, needless to say. But what it inspired with me, I got tears in my eyes, because he kept saying, we have to have, he didn't say a vision, but we have to have a belief that we are going to win. And remember all these pictures of him doing victory? Okay? And I guess one means something and one means the other. Anyway, if you see the movie. Anyway, so the secretary was saying how, okay, you really don't want to say that because it means up your, and then the other one means victory. Okay, so he learned that. He just laughed and he thought that was so great. But what inspired me so much is that with all the people that were against him, the king, Parliament, everybody, he still got elected. And what happened is that during his time of being the prime minister, he was able to inspire the people to come together in oneness, all right? Because they weren't exactly, they were divided, obviously. There's two houses in Parliament, as we have in our country. And I feel like we're a bit divided right now, but that happens in countries. So what happened is that he was galvanizing them to come together in oneness and to come together in positivity, because you saw that. So there was one scene where, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he was counseled to connect with the people of England and find out what they wanted. And he said, do you want to have the Nazi flag flying above Buckingham Palace? And they go, never. And then he would say things like that, and it galvanized them, and the people came together in such a way, and he said, do you want us to surrender, and do you want us to have peace talks? And they said, he's not going to surrender, he's going to take us over, and then he's going to create everything he wants to create. So the people said, we will fight. If we have to take the knives out of our drawers in our kitchens, we will fight, and we will do whatever it takes to protect our land and protect ourselves. And what I loved about him in the whole Dunkirk, I had no idea about this part in history. There's two parts. There's another movie about how there was an Englishman that cracked the German code. Did you ever see that one? Okay, so there was a lot of things going on, but what was happening underneath all that was a lot of prayer. So he would call for prayer all the time. He called for prayer and galvanized the country. We're going to pray, and we're going to know we're going to come together. And if we don't believe that we have that power within us, you just have to look back at certain times in history, and that's why I got goosebumps. Because if we pray and we know that truth for our lives, and if they can pray and know that truth for a country against a person that was an unstoppable force at that time, then we can create it in our lives, can't we? And we can create that to happen. So here's part of the story. There was a time where they had all of the troops out, and most of them were at Dunkirk, okay? And there was a small battalion over in another area. And he said, we need to take, I don't know, I'm going to say there was 50,000, and then there were several million over in Dunkirk. So he said, we're going to have to draw the fire onto that battalion. And they said, but you're going to kill all of them. And he said, but we're going to save our entire army if we do this. And so he held to that, and he said, I'm so sorry, but unfortunately, that's what I'm being guided to do. And so they did that, they drew the fire, and then you know the story of Dunkirk. He then asked the Navy to ask all of the private ship owners, all the boats, fishing boats, to go save all the men in Dunkirk. That's what that story's about. And so as they galvanized and they went and they saved, I don't think they saved everybody, but they saved most of that army. Because if they hadn't done that, because they were saying, oh, you can't do that, Churchill, you can't do that, he said, we're lost. We'll lose almost all, 3/4 of the men. And they were all over in Dunkirk, across from the English Channel. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So, you know, it really is a testimony, because people believed so much that they were going to have a success and to win. And that's what we have to have in our lives, don't we? We have to have that belief that we are going to have whatever we have, whether it's a health situation, whether it's our relationships. And it's really about us having that deep belief and trust. And if we don't have that, then what do we have in our lives, really? Because we're just kind of flitting around in a boat and we don't have a rudder, do we? So with that, just to be awake and aware around all of that and have that deep trust and belief in yourself. And if there's things on the news that bother you or things that are going on in our country right now, what we did in the beginning of the service, what do I love about my country? What do I love about my life? What do I love about me? And as we hold that truth for ourselves, then we can expand and have, as Roxy was reading, expand and have that goodness come to us. You know, and I was kind of amazed, you know, when you work on yourself over a period of years, you're going to attract to you people that are simpatico to you, people that are like you. And out of 34 people on that bus, we were so connected, we were so in harmony, and everybody was kind and loving. And we were all from the United States, I think almost all of us. I don't think there was anybody who wasn't. And I kept saying to Art and I kept saying to people on the trip, I said, you know what, this is so beautiful that we all are honoring, and we were like a little mini country on that bus. So imagine, you're on a bus for 8 days, okay? So you're sitting there and being in close quarters. And as we were just, as it went along, nobody was a brat, nobody was nasty or negative, everybody was honoring. Don't you want a world like that? So I'm seeing a microcosm of the macrocosm. I'm seeing how it can be, and that's my vision. And so as we see that, we allow ourselves to see the world, and every week I pray for us to honor each other and our diversity. And boy, do I love diversity. Because when you're in another country, you see their traditions and you see their ways. It's so fabulous. It really is. And as you see that, you know, it's amazing. How many of you saw Coco, the animated film Coco? That was another thing about honoring our ancestors. But it was also about honoring each other. And in that film, it was honoring that diversity, but it was also honoring of our ancestors. And they would put the flower petals and they would put them in front of the pictures of their ancestors so they would remember them. And that's the song, Remember Me, okay? So if you hear that, that's what that's all about. So we want to remember our ancestors. We want to remember all of the people that brought us here and gave us the grace of this gorgeous country. We want to honor all of the people that paved the way for us. You know, they came from England, they came over here and they colonized, and here we are to this day. Aren't we grateful? We really are. And so it's just lovely. So one thing I want you to take away today is to allow yourself to feel positive. Turn off the darn TV if it's bringing you down and you're feeling negative, because there's nothing you can do. I love my mom dearly, but she's gotten on this kick about politics and all this stuff, and I said, you know, I didn't call to talk about the government, politics, I just called to see how you are, and I love you. And so if you have anybody that's a different framework or has a different opinion, it doesn't matter. My best friend has a totally different way of thinking than I do. Do you know what? I love her for that. Because I love how she thinks differently from me. I love that she has another viewpoint that I have. And what I also saw, and I really saw in myself that I've gotten a little bit stuck and complacent. And my honey, Art, showed me that on the trip, that I tend to be, you know, before we left, I'm like, and I was worried about going. And then I thought, you know what? Be more open to the experiences in the world. Be more open to things around you. Be more open to new ideas. And if somebody has a different idea than you, listen to them. And listen to what they're saying. And conversely, hopefully they'll listen to you too, and it'll expand them. But the only way we're going to come together in this world, the only way we're going to become one, in harmony, in unity, and come together in a place of peace and have a world that works for everyone, is for us to honor and accept and embrace every single person on this planet. And it doesn't mean that you have to honor or embrace somebody that's out for revenge or out for, you know, that is causing a lot of strife. But we can hold the intention and surround them in love, because there's nothing you can do when someone has been raised with hate, except we can hold them in love, we can hold them in peace. And one of the things that we learned here, and one of my favorite stories is, I have a friend who's a nurse she's a dialysis nurse. And I always say, okay, so you know what you have to do when you have a crazy family or people are going nuts on you? Because a lot of times she'll have somebody on dialysis and the family's going crazy and they're being kind of upset and they're trying to direct her and saying things to her. So all she said one time it got so bad, this family was so bad. And she just turned around, faced the wall and said, love and light, love and light, love and light, love and light. And then because she did that, she was able to then administer to the patient and be patient with the family. So all I'm going to say to you is our lesson, and boy, I have to learn it every single day, and witness yourself. Be aware of how we are in each and every moment. And boy, I can be a real brat, and I see that in myself, and I'm sure you can witness yourself too. I can be loving and kind, and then there's also this part that can be a real brat. And so as I see that and I become more aware of it, as I notice it and I'm aware, I can dissipate it. And I can make a different choice next time, yes? And that's really what it's about. So there's a quote, as I'm watching the Academy Awards, there was a quote from the Nutty Professor, Jerry Lewis, okay? So here's the quote. Might as well like yourself. Think about all the time you have to spend with yourself. Right? So it's like, you know, you might as well like yourself because you've got to spend the rest of your life with yourself. So if you're not happy with yourself, and I saw, you know, my old stuff coming up during the trip, and I'm like, wow, that's really, thank you for sharing. Mwah, mwah. And then I had to let go of it because, you know, I have a tendency, I don't know if you all do, but I do, to make stuff up in my mind. And it's not true at all. So I got to just share one. So this is one of the mind craziness that we do. So I meet the minister and he goes, and you know, what are you a pastor of, what kind of church? And I'm like, oh Lord, I tell him science of mind. And then I thought, you know what, just go for it. Be fearless, okay? I'm going to be fearless. So I said, you know, it's called Science of Mind, New Thought, Unity. And I said, we're pretty much have the same belief system. And then I didn't see him, and I made up this whole story that he walked away and he didn't ever want to talk to me again. You know, and all the man was doing was listening to the tour guide. Okay? But here's the kind of stuff that we make up. And so I had the opportunity to shift, and in that moment, and we were the last night, we had a dinner, and he was down in the lobby, and I walked up to him, I said, because that's a story you got in your head, girlfriend. And I walked up and I said, you know what, thank you so much for sharing about the man that is in distress right now, about his funds being unavailable. And I said, but you and I both know God has a plan for him. And he says, you're right, Pastor. You know, God bless you. You know, and we just hugged each other. And I just got goosebumps right now because we make stuff up. All I'm going to tell you is that let go of that and create the reality you want. Because after I saw what I was creating, I go, you don't want to create that? And so I allowed myself to let that go and allowed myself to be in the love and be in the harmony and be in the peace. Isn't that a better way to be? Yeah. So I'm going to close with that we are now being held in that loving embrace of Spirit, loving embrace of God. And how many of you want to claim that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. How many of you want to be in peace and harmony and balance in your life? Yes. How many of you want to be more positive in your life? Yes. How many of you want to embrace the good so that you can expand your world in order for you to have the more come into your life? And the more means the more is that God is seeking, knocking at your door, and you're going, just open the doors, open the windows, beloved ones, because it's all coming to you. It's there. But we're the ones that have to say yes. So let's say yes. Yes, 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 yes. So thank you, my beloveds. Have a beautiful week. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Love you madly. Glad to be home. And mwah, I'll see you over in the community room and we can chat a little more. Peace and blessings.
Yay.
Yay. Bob, you have your hand up.